We go through it.
That sounds like normal.
We're not sure. No, it would have to be. No, it's.
I don't like any of those shoes.
Me either. Okay, I don't want to say anything.
Can we, okay, just so John get any from like the smear pack, and then can we just like all go get the same ones that are like better?
Probably.
Because they were all really bad.
All right, guys.
One pair that wasn't that bad.
They were ones that were bright red and royal blue.
Did you want
Like the
navy
red
shoes?
shoes.
You want navy shoes?
Anderson.
I don't know why.
He's coming. He just pulled his
He did tell you he was coming?
He just pulled in. I can see.
Oh, I see him.
Right
There you
now.
go.
It's right there.
Moving with such urgency. Yes, yes.
He's coming down the steps.
To the right.
We're good.
He wouldn't be able to hear me if I banged on the window.
Open the window. Start yelling.
Yeah, Carlson started yelling at Elias one day.
I have a megaphone. I'll bring one.
It's like on the left there, so it was like yelling.
I feel like the pencil sharpener rule should apply to Anderson being late. Like we're allowed to yell.
What's that?
The pencil
Like
sharpener
public
rule should
meeting.
apply to Anderson coming late. Like if you use a pencil sharpener in class, your class gets to berate you. Like that should apply
Yeah, but I got a cup of sharpened pencils.
specifically to Anderson coming late.
Like Natalie goes in there every like other day. and She sharpens her pencil. I'm like,
That girl cracks me up.
grab a sharpened pencil.
Five times an AP Chem every day.
No, we were in AP Chem the other day, and she goes, "Oh my God, a red scale hawk," and she like stops the whole lesson and just is like, "Whoa!" and just like the whole class is
I
like,
love her.
All right, guys, here we go.
She's going to court on May 19th because she got a
Come
ticket for
back.
driving too slowly.
To me. Hey, so we're going to talk about three major things today. I've mentioned these before already. What you need to know about these formulas and the problems we're going to be doing, because you're going to have some questions about the finance aspect of things, the definitions. Like I might say, give you a definition of a 401k with a blank, and you'll have to know, oh, that's a 401k versus a 403b. Right now, you might go, I don't know the difference, but those are on the definitions page. You can learn those. I might say, have a definition of a bond or a stock, and you'll have to be able to fill in the blank on stuff like that. You can kind of get a feel for that if you look through the review sheet. If you bother to study and learn that stuff, it will not be a big deal for you guys. Or at least it hasn't been in years past, and I don't see why it would be any different. The thing that may give you a little trouble is just some of the algebra. So right here, when you're using these formulas, what I will do is give you a problem, and you'll see some of that today. We won't do anything tomorrow while you're testing, and then we'll come back on Thursday and do some more. But you'll see a little bit of this work where I give you a problem, and you go, oh, I need to use one of these formulas. These formulas are what you're going to use for one-time investments. What I mean by one-time is, you know, you inherit $1,000, you go buy some kind of whatever with it, and you put it in there, and you let it grow at a certain interest rate for a number of years, certain number of compounding periods, and it ends up being here. And you figure out that amount. But what I also might do is tell you, okay, if you have $1,000 now, and you want to end up with $2,000 at the end of 10 years, what kind of interest rate should you earn? And you'll be solving for R. Or maybe how many years would it take? How many years would it take at a certain interest rate for $1,000 to go to $2,000? So you basically have to be able to solve for any variable that's in this situation, with the one exception of the N. I'm probably not going to have you solving for the N, because this would probably, well, I might actually, but if I do have you solving for the N, it would be a calculator solve, like where you'd have to graph it. Probably won't do that. I haven't in years past, although it's probably a good idea, but whatever. And then this formula is the same formula as this one, except, does anybody remember, when do you use this one? When you're compounding an infinite number of times a year, and the way you would see that worded, it would be compounded continuously. So when the number of compounding periods per year becomes so huge, I can't plug an infinity in there in these formulas for that, and that. Now, you actually can. You could still get your answer accurate to a couple of decimal places if you just picked a really big freaking number. So if you pick something like, 999,999 there and 999,999 there. You got a question?
Yeah, in what real world situation does
I can't think of any. Not with money. I can't. But I just want you to get exposed to this formula a little bit. Again, this finance doesn't really fall under any real category. So I'm making it fall because it does talk about exponential growth and decay. And you do a lot in calculus with exponential growth and decay. And even though it doesn't look like this, it looks like y equals CE to the KT. The whole idea of initial amounts and final amounts kind of is a decent justification for sliding this in here. And I want to make sure that you at least see some of this, because if your parents are like my parents, they don't like to talk about their money situation. Probably because if it's a good money situation, you're like, I'm a member of this family. Why am I driving this crappy car? Or hey, why do I have to work so much? Or why? I mean, it does. It creates this kind of this whatever. So some people like to just kind of keep it close to the vest. I found very few parents that are like, hey, let's sit down. Let me show you our financial structure, where we are as a family. Very few parents like doing that. My kids don't know where we are. I mean, I tell them we're in a decent place and not to worry about us. And my hope is that they never have to worry about us financially when we're old and decrepit, and I really do hope that I don't have to be a burden on our family and that we've structured our finances in a way where, granted, it's a blessing to help an older person that's a parent or whatever it is. It's a blessing. It might be a hard blessing, but it's a blessing. But that being said, I don't want my kids to be like, holy moly, this is really killing us, the burden of having to take care of them financially and bring in help. I hope that if I ever am in that state, or my wife is, that we'll be fine. And I think probably most people would say the same thing financially. But make sure that you understand how to use these. We will do some in class. I will even show you how you can actually do this on your calculator, but by manipulating your calculator a little bit to kind of think this way. But the program, when I say on your calculator, there's a calculator program I'm going to show you in a couple seconds. And the calculator program is, granted, not as great as it could be. I really do think that they could tweak it a little bit, make it a lot easier to use, but they haven't. It's been in that calculator program since probably 1992. So it's really, really old, maybe even before that, maybe 1995. It's a really old program, but it does get the job done. And when I was in school and I got my finance degree, we actually had to use annuity formulas for what your calculator will do, which is really tedious math. And but you're not going to have to do that. So we're not going to learn that aspect of it. I don't even know if they even teach that aspect of it in that school now. That's a long walk from the parking lot. The hustle.
Did you see?
You're even late for 8:10 class.
I'll do better.
All right, so make sure you understand what these. Does anybody have any question about what these variables mean on these formulas? Anybody? Be honest. It's okay. You're good? Okay. Now, again, we'll do a couple of these, but the key to these is it's a one-time investment. So if you see somebody going, all right, Biff invests $1,000 a month, that's not a one-time investment. That's a multiple-time investment. And when you're investing every month or every quarter or every year for a period of time, that's an annuity. And we don't use this for annuities. We use these, or this kind of calculator thinking, program on the calculator thinking. Okay, so I'm going to scroll down to here, and I want to talk about what you're going to see on your calculator. And if you want to pull your calculator out right now, you can. Does anybody need an Inspire? I've got a few. Grab one right there out of that bin. I've got actually a bunch. Grab one out of there, and what I want you to do is turn this thing on. All right, I always forget where to go on this because I rarely use this one. Okay, so I'm going to zoom in on this. Okay, so this is just regular old, you're doing work, you're calculating, making calculations. On this screen right here, I want you to go to menu, which is where you normally go to get stuff done, right? Go to menu, and at the very bottom, what do you see? Finance. So hit 8. When you hit finance, you're going to have all these different things that you can do. It's a really great calculator in terms of doing really weird amortizations and things like that, which we're not going to talk about. Cash flow problems, interest conversions, things that we do not do in this class. We're going to live on number one, the finance solver. So I'm just going to hit 1, and you're going to see this table. And I will have that identical table on your test, and you'll see it on your classwork today. If you go to that classwork finance that has all these problems, you will see a table that looks like this. Now, these variables mean different things than the other ones. So like the n right here, the n here is not the same as the n in the little formulas we talked about just a second ago. So you have to make sure you can differentiate, okay? This n is really annoying. But if you're looking at this screen, I'm going to get off of this and go back to the what you see. This n doesn't stand for the number of compounding periods. It doesn't. What it stands for is the number of years times whatever you're going to end up putting into this PY. And the PY is actually PPY on the new calculator. On the old 84s, it was PY. But it's this PPY, okay? And PPY means payments per year. So let's just say you are investing and you are putting something away every month. So you're putting $600 a month or $500 a month because you took my advice and you're like, you know what, I don't care what I'm making. I can budget on $6,000 less. So you take $500 a month and you stick it away, which is going to pretty much guarantee your financial security. No, there's no guarantees in life, but it's going to give you the best opportunity for financial security when you're 62, 67, 72, whatever years old, if you just commit to doing that and just do it. And when you can do more, keep doing more. Even if it's not in your IRA, even if it's just in your savings or if it's in your some other investment account, but you're going to do it, you're going to commit to doing it, you're going to be in a good place. That's your end. So if you are saying, doing a problem that said, hey, how much would you have at the end of 40 years, if you put $600 or $500 a month, so you're going to say 40 times 12, and that's what would go there. And you don't even have to do it off to the side. You can type in 40 times 12, and when you scroll down to the next spot, it'll do the calculation for you. And we'll do tons of this, you'll see. Okay, interest rate. Now here, unlike the other formulas we use, in the formulas, if we have 12%, I have to enter it in as 0.12. Everybody with me? Here, we're not going to do that. If it's 12%, you put 12. It's 5%, put 5. Are y'all with me on that? So in the formulas, got to have the decimal. Here, you're not going to use the decimal. All right? Present value. Okay, now, present value can be a little tricky, but present value literally means what is the value now? Now, there's two kinds of things we're going to be looking at with these formulas. We're going to be looking at investing and growing money, and we're going to be looking at paying off debt. So like, let's just say you want to buy a house, and that house is for sale in Homewood for 550 grand, right? And maybe you put a down payment on it, so you're left with a $450,000 that you have to borrow from the bank, right? Or some mortgage company. So you borrow $450,000. Well, that would be the present value of this investment, okay? Now, if you're starting out investing and you're like, you know what, I'm 22, I just got my first job, I'm about to get my first paycheck, I'm going to start putting money away. Well, how much money is in your account at that point? None. You have nothing right then, right? You haven't even started investing. So in that case, you would have $0 as a present value. Are y'all with me? So it depends on whether you're dealing with a loan or investment. And again, you'll have lots of practice with this, but that's what I mean by a present value. So it's how much you have before you start your payments. Like if you're talking about a loan, or I'm sorry, if you're talking about an investment, or how much you owe on the loan, depending on what kind of situation you're in. All right, payment, that should be pretty obvious. That's what you're either paying towards your loan. So like if your home loan is $1,500 a month, and you're writing a check for $1,500 back to the mortgage company to pay off that debt and make it smaller, or if you're just putting away $600 for your future retirement. That's what we mean by payment, okay? And then F value would be future value. Now, future value, sometimes you want to go, all right, well, what am I going to have in the future if I put $600 or $500 a month or whatever? And you can actually solve for FE and find out what your projected amount is. Now, that's really hard to project because we're kind of guesstimating on our interest rate, right? We're putting an interest rate in there that's like, well, Maybe I'm gonna average 9%. Maybe I'm gonna average 8. Maybe I'm gonna average 13. I mean, I've averaged 16 to 17% in one investment and 13% in the other over the past 3 years. But I haven't done that for all, 20 something, 30 years I've been investing. So we don't know in a situation, we're just kind of speculating, but the problems that will be given to you in the problem, or you would be finding that in the problem. Okay, and then finally, payments per year. This is really important because whatever you put for PPY right there and payments per year, be like, all right, if you're paying off your house, it's normally monthly payments, plug in a 12. If you're investing every quarter, plug in that. Some people, like my daughter, gets paid every 2 weeks. So instead of doing monthly payments towards her investments, she's doing every 2 weeks. So instead of doing monthly or 12 times a year, she's going 26 times a year, but doing it every 2 weeks. Does that make sense? But that would be your payments per year. And whatever you put there, whatever you put right there also has to go up here. And I need to fix this where it says PY. Okay, and this PY right here also should say PPY. The old program on the 84 said PY, and then your calculator, they updated it to PPY. But anyway, whatever. When you see PY, that's what I mean. I mean payments per year. And then finally, this part's not really tricky, but a little tricky. This right here says payment at. Okay, so this is how you can kind of remember this, or you can just memorize it. So hypothetically, let's just say that one of you walks into the building. I'm a banker, and you're like, man, I need some money for a house. I'm like, okay, what do you need? I think I need about 400 grand to get this house. And they're like, well, do you have any collateral? Yeah, I've got some cash, and I'm going to put a down payment on this. The house is worth 500, but I'm going to give you 100, and you can have 100 if you let me borrow 400. All right, so I will go ahead and pay that up. Now they like that, so 100 of that goes to the owner of the house, right? That's selling it to you, and they're like, great, that guy's got 100. So basically, all we have to do is let you borrow 400,000 on a house that's worth 500,000. Now, why do you think that's important to them? That you put a down payment down. Do what?
Like you're gonna commit to that.
Yeah, there's a level of commitment, because what if Ella is this person, right? And she just decides, you know what? I'm sick of making my payments. I'm out. And sadly, what if she loses her job or has a life experience where she has to leave real quickly? And she's like, I'm just out. I'm not going to pay off the house. Well, if she quits making payments, the bank goes, well, we technically own the house. We own and most of your parents, I mean, you might have parents that own their house outright. It's pretty rare, especially at your age, that your parents will have paid off their house, because most of them probably got a 25 or a 30-year loan on their house, and they probably have been paying on it for 15 years or so. If they're still in that same house, they probably have another 15 years to pay on it. But the point is, the bank likes that, because if you walk away, what they're going to do is try to sell it as quickly as possible. And in this market, you just put a sign in the front yard and people are trying to buy it for more than you're asking in Homewood. But in most situations, you put a sign on your house, and it's hard to sell your house. You got to clean it all up. You got to get people in there. Well, the bank's not going to do that. They're just going to put a sign up there. They might even put it up for auction, and they're going to take the highest bidder. And that highest bidder is probably going to come in under market. And if it comes in under market, that's bad for you. But if they've got a down payment on it, they're going to get theirs. You know what I mean? If the house is worth 500,000, it might sell for 450 real quickly. I mean, like real quickly. That's okay. They're going to take the money they're owed and give you back whatever's left. And if there's not anything left, stinks for you. You just lost your down payment. But that's the idea of a down payment. And most banks like you to put down 20%. So on a $500,000 house, they're going to want you to have 20%. And if you don't have 20%, they're willing to sell it to you, assuming you have maybe a really good job or whatever. They're willing to sell it to you, but most of them require you to get what they call mortgage insurance, or MI. And mortgage insurance, basically, you have to pay insurance for some other company to insure you in case you walk away from the loan. And the bank will require that you have mortgage insurance to make sure that they get their money back in the event that you default on this loan. Does that make sense what I'm saying? But anyway, that's the whole idea about down payments and stuff. And I will work down payments into a couple questions. But bottom line, if you buy a house for 500 grand and you make a $100,000 down payment, what's your loan going to be for? 400, right? Because the price of the house is 500. A down payment means you're going to pay off 100 of it right off the bat, And then that last 400, you're going to get a loan for, and that's going to go up there under your present value, because that's the current value of your loan, not the value of your house, but what you're trying to pay off. But anyway, when it comes to this, back to our scenario, if you come in and borrow $400,000 from me, the bank, when am I going to make you start paying it off? Instantly? Or am I going to at least give you a month to borrow it, right? I mean, doesn't that make more sense? Because if I make you pay it off, start paying it off instantly, like literally, if I hand you $400,000, I'm like, all right, you owe me $2,500, and you hand me back $2,500. Did you really even borrow $400,000? No, you really borrowed more like what, 390, whatever, 397.5. So you're going to at least take that full amount and borrow it for a month, which means when you make your first payment, would your first payment be at the beginning or the end of that month? That's what this is talking about. So if you're dealing with a loan, your first payment comes at the end of the period that you borrowed. Is that making sense? Okay. Now, I don't mean the end like the end of the actual month. Sometimes banks do that. Like I closed on my house, I think it was on June 6th, my first house. And they said, hey, when do you want to make your first payment? Do you want to make it actually like at the end of this month, which is really on the first of the next pay? Or do you want to go like a month and a half? Because a lot of people like to actually, banks will allow you to wait like a month and a half if you're mid-month. And the upside of that is you don't have to pay that first payment. You kind of get to skip it. And if you've really had a lot of closing costs and things like when you buy a new house, there's all kinds of crap you have to buy to get the house functional, right? I need some brooms, I need dustpans, I need a couch, I need all this stuff. So people tend to be a little tighter when they buy that first house. And banks a lot of times are like, oh, we'll let you skip that first payment and just start that at the end of that period. Well, of course they are. The longer you have the money, the more interest you're paying them, right? They're encouraging you to borrow this. They're getting paid. So, but just remember, if you're dealing with any kind of loan, you're going to make your first payment at the end. Now, if you're investing, are you literally going to walk into an investment place, or nobody walks in anymore? Are you going to open up an account and get it ready to go? Like, all right, I'm going to start investing in a little while. No, when you walk in and start investing, usually it's for right now. So if you're ever dealing with personal investing or whatever, where you're putting money into an account, you're putting your money in at this moment. So we say we're doing that at the beginning. What you have to be careful about is not double paying at the beginning. What I mean by that is say you say, I want to put in $1,000 a month. Don't say, okay, my initial amount is 1,000. Remember these numbers? Don't say my present value is 1,000 and my payment is 1,000, and I'm going to do that at the beginning of the month. What does that actually do then? If you say my present value is 1,000, my payment is 1,000, and I make my first payment at the beginning, what does that actually do? I double paid that first one because I put 1,000 in and I made a payment of 1,000 in that very beginning. So you don't want to do that. So when you're investing, you want to say, what is my present value? How much did I have before I began payments? Nothing. Well, unless you had like a bunch of money already and you stuck it in there, but whatever. You'll have to read the problem and decipher that. So my goal for you today is to be able to know how to use your calculator and be able to understand what's happening when you're plugging junk in. And then one last thing. Everybody with me on this? Because it's going to happen to you, and I doubt it's going to happen today. It might. I don't know how far we're going to get. But every now and then you go to do something and your calculator says error, or it gives you some negative amount, or it gives you some bizarre number and you're like, I know that can't be right. I'm not going to make 72,000 payments, in my 40 years. Like that doesn't even make sense. This is what you have to understand about what they call cash flow. All right. When you make a payment, okay, if I call that a positive number, like I'm putting in positive $600, then when I take money out, that is a reverse cash flow. That would be a negative number. Are y'all with me? Now I can call the payment a negative number, but that would mean the amount I take out would be what? Positive. It's kind of like velocity if you're in physics, where velocity to the right or up is positive, but velocity down or to the left is negative. Same with acceleration. Well, it's kind of like that with cash flow. One way is positive, the other way is negative. And you have to make sure, most of the time it doesn't matter, but you got to make sure that it lines up. And every now and then, and this is especially true when you're solving for the number of years, people go, oh, My payment is this positive number, and my future value is a positive number. Wait a minute. The future value might be what you're pulling out. The payment's what's going in. Those should have opposite signs. So you'll see it. Your calculator will wig out or give you some unexplainable value. When that happens, or you're confused, remember that cash flow has to change direction, which means one has to be positive, one has to be negative. All right? So let's just jump through a couple of these problems, see if you're in good shape. Please ask me questions. I know that y'all are not much for, like my other class asked me questions the whole period. Y'all are just kind of staring at me, but it's okay.
We just soak in the knowledge.
Just soaking it in. Okay, so I'm going to read through these, and then we're going to go to this problem. I tell you what, I don't need to look at my calculator here. Just get rid of it. I'll just write it on the board. So jump into page 127. Okay, so here we go. How much? So the question is, how much will my monthly payment be? Now, where would monthly payment have gone on this situation right here? Where would I be putting monthly payment?
PPY.
That would be not PPY, because that's payments per year. Monthly, 12 would go there. Is that what you mean?
Yeah.
12 goes there, but where would the amount of the payment go? The amount that I'm actually putting in. Where should that go if I knew that and had to enter it? That's PMT. That's your payment. Okay? Now, 12 doesn't go there. We don't know that. The question is, how much will that be? So this PMT, that's what I'm actually solving for. You don't enter question mark, but I'll show you how to solve for that. But that's what the question is. I might have said, how much is your monthly payment? I might have said, how much is the future value? I might have said, what is the interest rate? I might have said, how many years? What is the present value? I could have asked you anything, right? But because I asked you that, that's what we're actually going to be solving for, and I'll show you how to do that after we get everything filled in. But because I said monthly payment, my payments per year is what? 12. I'm going to enter 12 right there. Be on a house that you purchased for $275. Now, this didn't mention one thing about a down payment. So we're going to just assume that I purchased a house for $275 and they didn't require anything down. So what does $275 represent in this problem? What value? It's the present value, because I'm dealing with not an investment. I mean, it is kind of an investment, but I'm dealing with a loan here, aren't I? So the present value of my loan is $275. Now, if there was $275,000, so if there was a down payment, I would have subtracted the down payment from the $275 and put that in there. But there's no down payment. So literally, this guy is borrowing $275,000. Okay, keep reading. If you get a 30-year loan, where does 30 go? N. But it's not the only thing that goes with N, is it? But it does go in there for N. So I'm going to plug a 30. But what else goes with N? N was defined as the number of years times what? The PPY. And the PPY is 12. So I have to go 30 times 12. And by the way, if you just type in 30 times 12, when you tab down or scroll down, it'll automatically do the calculation for you and spit out 360. So don't have to worry about multiplying that out in your head or whatever. Keep reading. With a 6.25% interest, that used to be a very common interest rate. I remember when 6.25, I was like, that's actually a pretty good rate. Now you can get rates under 2%. Lowest in the history of my memory, and I remember all the way back to the 70s. In the 70s, rates were 17, 18%, which was nuts. The inflation was so bad. But they're trying to hold down inflation to encourage the housing market to do well, which I don't think it needs any encouragement. They're building so fast you can't even buy sod. Like, I can't find zoysia. Like, literally, it's like we're out. In the country, yep, no more zoysia. And I'm trying to do my front yard because they're out. Price of wood, have you even noticed, if you've heard parents talk about the price of wood? It's like doubled and tripled. Like, I saw a friend went to buy a 2x12 to replace this piece. It was a 2x12 board, I think 12 or 14 feet long or something like that. It was close to $60 for one piece of wood. I mean, it's insane. If you own timber, and go hug your parents. You got a pretty nice retirement if they start cashing in on that. or a nice inheritance. All right, let's keep reading. 6.25% interest. Now, do I write 6.25 here, or do I move the decimal? 6.25 in your calculator. So 6.25 goes right there. It's compounded monthly. Now, compounding in my formulas is little n. And compounding monthly would mean little n was 12. But what's compounding here? I don't even think I've mentioned it, but what's compounding here, do you think? Compounding per year. So that would be what? 12 also, because it says per year. Now, future value. Now, what are we talking about here again? We're talking about a loan, right? So if it's a 30-year loan, what's going to happen at the end of year 30? 0. Your loan's going to get paid down to nothing. That's what a 30-year loan does. They give you 30 payments. Interest is worked into that, and by the time you make that last payment, you are free. So the future value of your loan is going to be 0. And then the last thing you have to decide is, in a loan situation, do you make your first payment at the beginning or the end of the month? At the end, so you make sure end is highlighted. I'm just going to put a box around it, which is what you will do on your test. You'll just put a box right here. And then all that's left is your PMT. So you go to your calculator. It used to be you did control, but I don't remember what you did here. So I'm going to enter this junk in just to make sure I tell you correctly. So 360, 6.25, 275 payment is what I'm trying to find. Future value is 0. Both the payment and the compounding are 12. And payment is at the end. So I go back up. That's weird. I go back to payment. Okay, so I'm going to highlight on payment, and I'm just going to hit, I think you just hit enter. Yeah. Y'all with me? So get your cursor or whatever on payment, hit enter, and what does it spit out? Now, do you notice the negative? So it gives you negative 169322. So if you were to buy a house, or at least if your loan on a house was $275,000, your rent, or your not just rent, but that would be what you pay the bank every month for 30 years at this interest rate, $1693. Now, while we're on this problem, just to show you why interest rates are such a big deal, change that interest rate to 2 and look at what it does to your monthly payment. And this is why, part of the reason why housing markets are skyrocketing is interest rates are so low. Look what you get for your money. Change that interest rate to 2%, go back, and your $1693 becomes $1,016. So it's $600 less. Now, you know what most people do in this situation? In their head, what they do is they go, all right, I can afford about $1,600 a month. But at 2%, what kind of house can I buy? So what they do is they figure out what I can afford. This is what most couples do, or single people do, or whatever. When they start buying a house, they're like, okay, let's just say it was you. They go, all right, I want to buy this house. It's $275,000. I can afford about $2,000 of my salary per month. I know that seems like a lot, but if you're making, $85,000 a year or whatever, and your take-home pay after all is said and done is like $4,000 or $5,000, you can put $2,000 towards a house. You still have $3,000 a month to live off of after food and maybe a car payment and other kind of stuff. You'll be investing, of course. You'll still be okay. But most people do this, and they go, all right, if that's what I borrowed, I'm going to make a negative. You'd have to put a negative in there, and you could figure out if I'm doing that at 2%, they put a 2 in there, and they figure out, or heck, even if you don't do that, you can do this, plug a 2,000, they go, hey, how much house can I buy? So this is what a lot of people do. They just figure out on a 30-year loan at 2%, if I can afford $2,000 a month, what kind of house can I buy? What kind of present value loan could I get? And they let the math do the talking. And just to give you an idea about this, if you could do that at 2%, when you go to solve, you can afford a $541,000 loan, according to that mentality. So most people kind of sit down and figure out their budget. What can we afford for a house? And then they say, what kind of house can I buy? And they don't do this. They go talk to a realtor, but you could do it with your trusty TI-NSPIRE on your own. And then you could just call a realtor and say, hey, I want to look at houses, but I cannot go over that number, whatever. This one happened to be 540. So I cannot go over 540. And then they go start doing some hunts for you. Or you could call your realtor and say, hey, this is what I can afford. And they can do the math for you, except they probably just have a big table based on the interest rates, or a program that has a table based on interest rates. But right now they're sub 2%, according to the commercial I heard on the way over on Jock's radio. It was like, never before have I seen interest rates below 2%. You have to act now. And they're trying to sell, I don't remember what the company was, but yeah, below 2% is nuts. I mean, my current rate, before we actually paid off our house probably half a year ago, but my rate was like at 5%. I'm like, why am I still paying on this? Which was a good rate back then. And my first rate was 6.25 on my first house, which we thought was a great rate, but now it's just bizarre. But because of that, you can afford more house, which makes the demand go up. And if the demand goes up, so do the prices, and the economics takes over. All right, jump down to this next one. Okay, I got a little bored typing this out, but how much did Go Erdogur's, the Iraqi salesman, buy a car for if he is paying $562 a month? Okay, he's making $562 per month car payment on a 2-year loan at 8.7% interest. That was literally me in 1996 when I bought a car, bought this Acura Legend, and said I want to pay it off in 2 years, and that was my rate, which is astronomically high now. But on a 2-year loan, it doesn't affect you too much. It's on those big long loans that it does. Compounded monthly. He did not make a down payment on the car. So how do I fill in this information? How much did he buy a car for? So really, if I bought the car for and I'm making payments, sounds like I got a loan, didn't it? And if I got a loan, where would that loan amount go? Where would the loan amount go? The present value. And I don't know that loan amount. That's what I'm looking for. And a lot of times you can figure that out after you enter everything else in, but it's important that you get stuff in the right spot. Now, I am making a payment of $562 per month. So what is the $562 per month? Where does that information enter in here? Okay, so the payment is $562. And if you want to make that negative, you can. Most people don't because they're just not thinking ahead like that. So put a $562 in there. What else do I get from $562 per month? The payments per year is 12. And then where else does PPY go? Well, not necessarily. Where else does the PPY go? Up in the end, right? Times the number of years. And if I keep reading, how many years was that? 2 years, so I can go 2 times 12. I know the interest rate's 8.7, so 8.7. And then it says compounded monthly. So where does compounded monthly enter in? CPY would also be 12. And what's the future value of this loan after 2 years? Well, that's the whole idea of a 2-year loan, right? You pay it off after 2 years. Not you paying it for 2 years and then you go, all right, now what do I owe? A 2-year loan means you're paying it to zero in 2 years. So future value is 0. And then where am I going to have this beginning or end? It's a loan, so I'm going to make sure end is in that blank down there. And then you can see I'm solving for PV. So you're going to enter all this stuff in there like you did before. So 24, tab 8.7, tab 5, I don't know. And if there's a number in there, you don't have to make it 0. Just tab over it. Payment 562, future value 0. Payments 12, compounding 12, payment at the end. And then I'm going to go back to PV and hit enter. And what does it tell me? It tells me negative 12,000 something, right? So what does that mean to me? So I heard some mumbling, but I think the mumbling said, basically that's what I borrowed if I was making this kind of payment. So this guy bought a $12,000 Acura at 8.7%, knocked it out after 2 years, paid $562 a month, and was done on the car after 2 years. Are you with me? So on a used car, most people won't even let you get an extended loan on a used car, or especially unless it's like a really high-end used car, because it's a used car. Like when you go buy a 4 or 5 year old car, it might be new to you and you might feel really excited, but in 5 years, it might be worth less than you own on it. And banks don't like doing that, right? Because if it's worth less than you owe on it and you go and sell it, you might not have the money to pay it off. That kind of thing. So on a used car, a lot of times they can give you like a 3-year loan, or if it's a really young used car, like maybe only a couple years old, still has a lot of value, like maybe a Lexus or something like that, they might give you a 4 or 5 year loan. But most of the time, those used car companies are a little sketchy about that, just because so many people default overall. But anyway, jump to number 3. It says, how much money will you have tax-free at the time of your retirement if you start investing $333 per month in a Roth IRA? All right. And it says do that for the next 37 years. So that would put you 37 on 22, you'd be 59. And you do that at 11.5% interest per year compounded quarterly. And I know a lot of people are going to go 11.5% is not realistic. Maybe it's not, but I can tell you what the market has said over 40 years. And if you look at annualized rates of return, granted, that's a little different from the CAGR we talked about. But if you look at those growth rates, they've averaged between 11 and 14 for the last 120 years over any 40-year period you pick. So if that's the case, yeah, I think that it's realistic. I think this market probably in the next 2 to 3 years is going to tank a little bit. It is. But every time it takes, it always comes back. You can see that. And barring a global catastrophe, and I don't mean like COVID, I mean like world wars and governments exchanging hands, barring something like that, I just can't see how it's not going to keep happening. Now, capitalism goes under, some other form of economy comes in, or economic mindset comes in, and yeah, you could definitely see some changes, some huge changes in this kind of stuff. But you are the young minds of the future. We will see what you pursue, whether you learn from history or not. So let's figure that out right here. How much money will you have tax-free? So it says, how much money will you have tax-free at the time of your retirement? What are they asking a question about? They're asking about what? About what? Future value? Okay, so they're asking about how much money you're going to have in the future. Sorry, I can't hear you guys. So future value is what I'm looking for. That's what you're going to be solving for. If you invest $333 per month, this is an old problem from a long time ago when all you could is invest $3,500 a year, and I think $3,500 divided by 12 is $333. That's my guess. But anyway, that's a ballpark. But now you can put much more than that in your IRA. You can put up to $6,000 a year if you're under 50, which you all are. So nowadays I would put that number at 500, but it's an old problem. I didn't want to redo my keys. So here we go. So my present value is how much money do I have in my account right now before payments? Was there any indication that there was money in there already? So you got to put a 0. That's my present value of the account. And then the stuff I put in every month goes in where? That's the payment. That's the recurring thing. So there's a 333 goes right there. It says the interest rate was 11.5%. Put an 11.5 right there. Let's knock it out real quickly. Compounded quarterly, that's a 12. It did say I was paying per month. That's a 12. Careful at the bottom. Payment at when? Beginning or end? Beginning. How many years? 37 years. What do I also multiply 37 by? 12. Are you with me? And when I enter all that in there, so we got, did I make a mistake?
What is the 4 time?
Oh, compounded quarterly. My bad. Compounded quarterly 4. Hey, that's not normal. I'm just trying to see if you read. Normally, month payments and compounding do line up. They might not have in the olden days. Here we go. So let's look at what this young sap would have ended up with.
That me?
Future value 0. Present value, sorry, payment 333. So what did they end up with? Well, not negative, but hey guys, 2.3 million. 2.3 million. just at $330 a month. And what are you guys gonna be doing?
If that's early enough.
500s, right? This 500 is gonna be even better than 333.
Do you learn anything new on Wednesday?
Not in here.
Okay.
Yeah, there's so many of you. So I'm teaching this class, and I'm giving 7th period off for AP Psych, and then tomorrow we'll do nothing in here, and I'll teach this to myself.
Okay,
So yeah, that way you don't have to worry about watching videos.
okay, thank you.